The Eldar are manipulative folk, everyone's aware of this. It's a legitimate strategy, for all that the people who get manipulated by them might claim it's cowardly. Why fight a battle when you can get someone else to fight it for you, especially if said someone else hates the other person involved in the battle anyways? People always complain about the Eldar manipulating the Imperium into fighting orcs or chaos as if those aren't things they'd be happy to do anyways. But it's a spectrum, as most things tend to be. On the lower end, we have Baal Tan, who, while their seers are prominent, are nothing compared to the standing of their aspect warriors and autarchs. Magic is all well and good, as is knowing the future, but sometimes you gotta nut up and turn an entire planet into a wasteland with nothing else but good old-fashioned ultra-violence. Most Craftworlds are more middling, having their gimmicks but always being willing to turn to the seers when most needed. Iantin respects its seers, it just needs most of them as spirit seers, because most of the people on Iantin are dead. And then, we have Craftworld Ulthwe. There's never a problem they've faced that can't be fixed with the solution of throwing Farseers at it. Be it for their ability to read the future or ability to cast mind bullets on anyone nearby, Ulthwe has cemented its spot amongst the Eldar as the psychic Craftworld. Its position requires this, for it is well and truly damned, but by that same token it may also be the greatest hope for the Eldar race. So let's look at it and see just what kind of place can give birth to someone of such colossal dickery as Eldred Ulthron. But before I begin, are you doing what I assume 90% of my audience is doing and watching this video in bed? Well, in that case, allow me to introduce you to Helix, the sponsor of this video. Especially now that it's summer, now's the perfect time to grab yourself a nice mattress. It's gonna be plenty hot and uncomfortable after all. Luckily, Helix makes only the finest and most comfortable mattresses to ever grace this planet. I can personally attest to how well I sleep on my Helix mattress. Especially after coming back home from a decent bit of traveling, getting to crash back on top of this thing has been amazing. Slept better than any hotel I've ever been in, I'll tell you that much. How to get one couldn't be simpler. Just take the Helix sleep quiz, which takes 2 minutes tops, and you get matched with a mattress for your needs. Mine was the Helix Midnight Lux, and as I said, it's been nothing but a pleasure sleeping on this thing. And there's plenty more things to consider beyond that. Helix delivers the mattress right to your front door, so there's no need to worry about shipping or dragging the mattress back home. And not only did 82% of people in Helix's Wesper sleep study see an increase in their deep sleep cycle, but there's a 120-night sleep trial warranty just to ensure you like the mattress. With all that in mind, grabbing yourself a Helix sounds like a good deal. In fact, just to sweeten said deal, here's an offer from me to you. With Helix's 4th of July partner offer, you can grab yourself one of their mattresses at a nice 27% off. All you gotta do is click the link in the description or pinned comment, and you get yourself a 27% discount site-wide for Helix products. It's never a bad time to improve your sleep, so get yourself a Helix mattress today so you can rest better than ever tonight. Now then, Go-Go Gadget Eldritch Storm. Craftworld Ulthwe is a craftworld and therefore has the same early history as just about all the others. The name comes from Ulthanesh Shelwe, which means the Song of Ulthanesh, one of the greatest Eldar heroes, but he's been dead since the Eldar War in Heaven, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Ulthwe was one of the great trading vessels for those Eldar who didn't want to hang around the rest of their kin on the planets their empire controlled, but instead wander the stars, seeing the sights and trading with the planets they landed on. Probably still just for fun, the Craftworld Eldar certainly didn't need to be doing this, but it was a peaceful and respectable life. It definitely was compared to what the average Eldar was getting up to as the Eldar descended into hedonism more and more. Ulthwe, alongside the rest of the Craftworlds, would go from what I described to the desperate attempts at keeping the Eldar alive they are nowadays. Removed from their planet-bound kin, they saw the rest of the Eldar were growing increasingly depraved. Between them and various other holdouts of decency, such as those who would become the Exodites, they foresaw tremendous catastrophe on the horizon, and tried their best to get the rest of the Eldar to cool their jets with the murder orgies. When they saw almost no one was listening, and indeed it was only getting worse, they instead began taking anyone who was willing to come with them onto the Craftworlds, as well as all the bits of pre-fall Eldar culture and technology they could. Craftworlds are bigger on the inside, you see, so there was plenty of room for everything and everyone. As the birth of Slaanesh drew ever closer, Ulthwe fled from the heart of the Eldar Empire alongside the rest of the Craftworlds to escape the fate the rest of their people had brought upon themselves. Like most of the Craftworlds, they were far away enough to not be swallowed whole and immediately murdered. Unlike most of the Craftworlds, however, they weren't far away enough to be quite free of the consequences of Slaanesh's emergence. Turns out the Eye of Terror has a gravity pull, which does actually make a bit of sense in a variety of ways. To be metaphysical and warpy, the Eye of Terror is a giant psychic chaos rift, and Ulthwe as an Eldar Craftworld is plenty in tune with that sort of nonsense. It could be spiritually pulling the Craftworld in such a way as to have a literal physical effect. Alternatively, the Eye of Terror is apparently right on top of a black hole. It's called Cygnus X1, and it's a real-life actual black hole. Whether or not GW did this on purpose, or if that's just a happy coincidence that we could look at a galactic map and the evil hell portal happens to be over a black hole, I can't say. But either way, that could be another explanation. The Eye of Terror opening supercharged the black hole, and now Ulthwe was just physically stuck there. The webway being the primary method by which the Eldar travel meant this isn't at all a problem for the forces of Ulthwe to get around the galaxy. That's interdimensional transit after all, but I'm sure you can guess the obvious problem of being neighbors with demons. They tend to really lower the property values, blasting loud music well into the night and leaving rusted out frames of cars on their front lawns. Also, they invade you and try to devour your soul. Honestly, I put that below the neighbor who almost never mows his lawn, but above the neighbor who walks up to you while you're mowing your lawn and just will not stop talking to you even though you're clearly busy and just want to get on with your day. I'm not a very social person, if you couldn't tell. This resulted in one thing, which itself resulted in Craftworld Ulthwe being arguably the most unique of the Craftworlds, militarily speaking. Them being so close to the Eye of Terror has resulted in them specializing intensely into their psychic power. After all, while having a big gun brick like Cadia is a sound theory and works for the Imperium well enough, having 1,000 different future seers all ensuring you know exactly when chaos is coming can let you more elegantly deal with that issue, especially knowing that they can very conveniently figure out exactly when to move their forces around so the Black Crusade ends up at Cadia instead of Ulthwe. A darker theory spoken in hushed whispers by other Craftworlds, however, is that the proximity of it to the Eye of Terror has resulted in the Eldar of Ulthwe growing in psychic might in a darker way. They follow the seer path because they're damned and happen to get stronger from it. That's why they're called Ulthwe the Damned. That and the proximity to hell. There's the deeper reason, but being 5 feet from the Eye of Terror is also valid enough to call someone damned, because usually you are if you're that close. Since so many of their number are psychers, be it warlocks, farseers, or the occasional spirit seer, this means they lack the numbers to make up aspect warriors the other Craftworlds have. So they instead formed a proper standing army out of the average Eldar on the Craftworld, the Black Guardians of Ulthwe. All Eldar can become Guardians at a moment's notice, but they aren't strictly speaking trained in warfare. Black Guardians are. They drill and practice battle plans both offensively and defensively, and their job in the Craftworld is the military, coordinating any mundane aspects of the assault alongside what few aspect warriors on Autarch's Ulthwe does have. They're rather dour folk there, but they've been holding the line before the Traitor Marines even get to Cadia for as long as that planet stood. A bit of a grim attitude is to be expected, and they know they're a bulwark between the rest of the galaxy and chaos and are proud of it for all the trouble it brings. In this way, they're kind of the 40k equivalent to Kislev, the entity that chaos has to go through before they can get to the real narrative meat of a given invasion. As is befitting the Craftworld, especially into wizard nonsense, Ulthwe has a long and storied history of messing around with the fate of other races and even the rest of the Eldar, to the point that sometimes it gets on the nerves of the rest of the Craftworlds when the Ulthwe seers come knocking and you know damn well they're not only not bringing a fruit basket, but about to drop some unknowable garbage on you that might be manipulating you, might not be, but it's certainly almost bad news either way. They never drop by to just say hi and have a chat. It's always doom and gloom and visions of future doom and gloom. Even to the rest of the Eldar, the ways of Ulthwe look erratic and oftentimes self-defeating. None can match their ability to scry the future save for the most powerful demons of Tzeentch, so an Ulthwe Farseer might walk up to you and politely ask you to fire a shuriken round into their own leg at exactly 6 p.m. next Tuesday. This is because the shuriken will perfectly bounce off their leg bone, ricochet into the skull of a Chaos Lord that was in hiding nearby, and end up ensuring the Craftworld has another century of peace before the next major attack. That's them all the time, and eventually you gotta wonder if they're doing it because it'll guarantee an easier victory, or if they just get off on being schemers. Although admittedly, if I could see and influence the future, I would absolutely be pulling stunts like that. To give them their credit, plenty of invasions that would have harmed the people who can charitably be called the good guys of 40k have been halted by the Seers of Ulthwe. Orc-Waz, Tyranid hive fleets, all rerouted into each other's territory, or into warp rifts, or stopped before they could ever begin. Place the right rock at the right spot so a hive tyrant trips into a mine and the entire swarm falls apart, just as planned. They've even saved the Navigator House Belisarius way back in M31, which is damn early into the Imperium's history. In exchange, the house gave them 7 coins. Whenever someone from Ulthwe returns one of these coins, the Navigators drop whatever they're doing and assist the Eldar in their task. This has happened 5 times over the course of the Imperium's 10,000-year history, which means there's 2 more life debt coins to still be called in. Obviously, the house keeps this a secret from everyone, including the Space Wolves they're also closely allied with, but that's some pretty friendly relations with Xenos that Craftworld has managed to secure themselves. Eldrad himself, alongside some other Ulthwe members, even tried to talk to Fulgrim before he fell. It failed, and his efforts to prevent the heresy, or at least mitigate the damage, went with most of the rest of his party, but in all fairness, Slash herself was blocking his psychic sight. It took a whole-ass Chaos God to keep Eldrad and the rest of Ulthwe from unraveling the heresy. I think that's both a pretty good showing of competence and a sign that Ulthwe does want what's best for everyone. Since they failed in warning Fulgrim on account of his corruption already beginning, it also means Sanguinius still ended up dead, which is good in my books. They've gone to war with the Necrons, they spit in Chaos's eye at every available opportunity, and overall you should not mistake their focus on Farseeing and the psychic arts as them being unprepared for battle. The last thing many a foe has seen was the jaws of Ulthwe's Black Guardian's forces closing around them with perfect clarity of what they need to do, often with Harlequin's support as the clowns have good relations with them. Abaddon himself was even resoundingly beaten by the forces of Ulthwe. Eldrad beating Abaddon in melee combat is the most well-known part of this affair, but the entire battle was a masterpiece of Eldar strategy and foresight. Almost the entire Craftworld was emptied of Eldar, with those remaining waging non-stop warfare within it as the Black Legion's forces stumbled around and got picked off one by one for their trouble. His forces were severely depleted, and marching right into the seer chambers of Ulthwe, some of his most trusted advisors and lieutenants were butchered by Ulthwe's warlocks. It was a resounding defeat, and even though Eldrad saw the victory and Abaddon continuing to be a menace since he escaped, this was one of the few Eldar wins that didn't come with a Pyrrhic tag. A couple seers did die in the combat, but that's like the one thing Ulthwe has in spades. They can afford to throw a few Farseers into the wood chipper to see if they can't gunk it up. Of course, like all the Eldar, the Craftworld comes before anyone else, especially the Monk Eye. If a few million humans gotta die to save a few 100,000 Eldar, that's just what they're gonna let happen. The ultimate example of this is Armageddon itself, which can in fact be blame on Ulthwe. Although it was ultimately an act of self-preservation, Eldrad and the rest of Ulthwe engineered the Second War for Armageddon and the rise of Ghazghkull to save Craftworld at Harai. It worked, although the Craftworld was then destroyed later on by Space Marines after Tyranids first ate half of it. The end result either way was that the Orcs grew more powerful and millions upon millions of humans were traded for far fewer Eldar lives. Of course, being myself, I don't blame them for this. The Eldar are always right. And being self-serving is hardly unique to the Eldar in this setting, for all that other people call them selfish for what they do. The Eldar only do things to save themselves is partially true at most, and either way, so does everyone else. But even when they are at the end of the day helping everyone, it oftentimes doesn't look like that. When the Imperium calls the Eldar erratic and prone to whimsy, attacking and then befriending and then attacking again all on the same day, it's often because of something Ulthwe has done. Iant tends to be friendly to everyone all around, within reason, and Craftworlds like Bael'tan are certainly hostile, but their intentions are obvious. They want to kill you for trespassing on their land, and they're very clear about that. Cut and dry stuff. But for an example of what I mean here, Ulthwe might find evidence that chaos is, or soon will be, rampant in a given Imperial sector. Their way of dealing with it might be murdering the planetary governor, whose incompetence is what allows chaos to fester, and the replacement they've foreseen will be much more competent and deal with the chaotic threat. Plus, Imperial reinforcements sent to deal with the Eldar will find that while the Space Elves are long gone, they have a new target in the form of chaos. It's a bit of a muddy deal all around, to tell you the truth. Even I'll admit that this often results in them killing Imperials that don't really deserve it, though someone who doesn't deserve it dying is so common in 40k that hardly feels worth mentioning. And this is assuming that if the Eldar were to approach the Imperials and properly explain themselves and of the upcoming threat, the Imperium would listen to them and take precautions, as opposed to the usual response of going, "Die Xenos filth," and then sending in the Baneblades. Ulthwe does interact peacefully with the Imperium fairly frequently. Many members of the Inquisition have contacts amongst the Craftworlds and vice versa, especially, I'd assume, the Ordo Malleus for the Craftworld's knowledge on chaos, and radical members of the Ordo Xenos. But sometimes, they resort to violence, because in this setting that's oftentimes all you have. The stereotypical Eldar strategy of killing a bunch of people to warn someone of a threat is only semi-stereotypical with this Craftworld, and indeed probably where the joke comes from, given Dawn of War made everyone even more exaggerated than 40k already is, and this is the Eldar's version of that. In practice, they don't always do this, and they don't tend to butcher entire planets when they do, but it is something they practice from time to time. In fact, I'd wager if there was a Craftworld most likely to kill other Eldar, in a clandestine way at least, it'd probably be Ulthwe. A particularly arrogant Autarch who's also incompetent might be quietly removed by those of Ulthwe if they see the Autarch will lead them to nothing but ruin. It might not even be outright murder. They could just do some variation of telling the guy the classic, "There will be a great defeat when you embark on this campaign," and let the most obvious plot twist ever happen from there. As far as they're concerned, and they're right to think this way, they're dealing with the fates of untold amounts of Eldar, some of whom likely aren't born yet. If you gotta crack a few eggs today to ensure you can make tomorrow's omelet, they'll do it without a shred of hesitation. This rarely happens though, and annoying reputation or not, they're often right. Eldrad himself attempted to warn Craftworld Iyanden of how badly the Tyranids were going to maul them, but Iyanden, before becoming the ghost town Craftworld, had been on a near 10k year streak of constant dubs and was too arrogant to listen. During the 13th Black Crusade, where most of 40k's meta history has taken place around, Ulthwe was one of the staunchest defenders against Abaddon's forces. Launching countless strikes as the early forces of the Crusade left the Eye of Terror, they were able to harry them wherever they went. It wasn't enough, of course, that storyline was moving forward, goddammit, but it was still a valiant effort that cost the traitors dearly. Eldrad himself would be key in several of the events that followed as well, but I've already made a video on him. As a final note on the murderous manipulation thing, this has perhaps resulted in Ulthwe having countless human agents knowingly or unknowingly doing their bidding. The Harlequins acting alongside Eldrad and Ulthwe as a whole slaughtered their way into the Imperial Palace, cutting through Custodes and Mortal alike. Eldrad and other Ulthwe seers also calmed the warp to allow for the Imperial Fist successors to come together to defend Terra from the Beast. The end result of all of this was that the various Ordos of the Inquisition came to form, as opposed to it being one mostly monolithic, unorganized entity. And chief among them for these purposes would be the Ordo Malleus, the part of the Inquisition perhaps most likely to work with the Eldar and with contacts amongst the Craftworlds. You can call them cruel for it, but Ulthwe's sometimes violent manipulations have resulted in the Eldar having influence in the highest echelons of the Imperium. Hardly a failed affair, all things considered. And before we move on, the now retconned Eye of Terror campaign deserves a mention, which I love doing whenever given the slightest chance. The Eldar, and of course Ulthwe especially, given their proximity to it, conquered the Eye of Terror. They took it, marched in and reclaimed their homeworlds, damn near all of them. The history of GW using narrative events to reshape the setting, only to undo it when the win rates don't pan out how they want, isn't limited to Warhammer Fantasy and the Storm of Chaos that predates the end times. The Eye of Terror was 40k's version of that exact event, more or less. And the other funny thing about Warhammer 40k, rules-wise anyways, is that the Eldar tend to be on top of the win rate charts more often than not. While the people who like elves certainly don't write 40k lore, they appear to write all of the tabletop rules, so the Eldar reclaimed their ancient homes from chaos. About the only downside was Eldrad died to Slaanesh, but if I remember correctly, he had some spirit stones of his still lit, implying he wasn't truly dead anyways, and he took down an entire Blackstone fortress with him. This isn't even the funniest thing with the event either. The Imperium lost almost every planet because of losing proper 40k matches, but Battlefleet Gothic was included as well, and the Imperium won almost every space battle. So all of Abaddon's forces got glassed like they were on Reach, and then the event was retconned. As much flack as people get in whenever you point it out, if someone says Warhammer lore is set in stone, bring this up. Lore is set in stone until GW decides it shouldn't be, for better or worse. The fall of Cadia brought with it good and bad news for Ulthwe. Mostly bad, honestly. The good, however, is that the burst of energy the Great Rift caused/resulted from freed Ulthwe from its prison around the Eye of Terror. Be it because the evil juice is more evenly spread now, or Ulthwe just got shot out like a cannonball, the Craftworld can now navigate the galaxy at large and, more to the point, isn't stuck next to hell all the time. Unfortunately, this came at the cost of chaos being almost literally everywhere. Granted, this could just be more of the same for Ulthwe, because they already were next to the biggest warp rift in the galaxy, and now at least they can move around. Sure, demons are in more places now, but that isn't worse than it was before for them, and at least they can look at different sites as they move around now. Hardly ideal circumstances, though. In response to Eldrad stealing the crystals holding the souls of basically every Farseer ever from the Infinity Circuits, Ulthwe finally got sick of the guy and told him to piss off in exile. For the longest time, they had held him in nothing but high praise, but getting countless people's souls potentially devoured by Slaanesh is the kind of mess up that doesn't matter if it only happens once, or if it's one of the few failures you've had. Eldrad, for his part, shrugged and went off to work with the Ynnari, and countless members of Craftworld Ulthwe that still liked the guy went with him. This made Ulthwe's position even more precarious than it already was, since half your population leaving to wander the galaxy doesn't do wonders for your ability to defend yourself. Ulthwe has taken to more proactively forming alliances with everyone from other Eldar to the Imperium of Man, because now they desperately needed them. With their newfound positioning and ability to move came a surge of reports of the Black Guardians descending upon worlds for of course seemingly unclear reasons, all according to the Seer's plans. Friendships are formed, enemies slain, and the Eldar have kicked things into overdrive to stay alive in an ever more hostile galaxy. The Ynnari would go on to be the Ynnari, disappointing and always possible, and for Ulthwe's part, the Craftworld's weaknesses would not go unnoticed by enemies. A whole boatload of demons invaded them while all this was going down, and the entire affair was a harrowing experience for the Craftworld. It was only thanks to the effort of Eldrad and his fellow exiles, the Ynnari and the Harlequins all coming to save the day that Ulthwe was saved, though they did still put up a good showing in the end by banishing all the demons present, which included a large number of Keepers of Secrets and Kairos Fateweaver. Seems the Eldar still have the upper hand in sorcery, a double-headed bird fuck. Barely related, but I hate Kairos Fateweaver so much, and it's entirely because of Total War. I started Teclis campaign, and he comes sailing on up from Warhammer Antarctica to either start burning down my cities right after I move my armies away, or he gives my settlements to someone I really don't want to fight at the moment and laughs at me. Eat shit, Birdman, I hate you. Back on topic, we need to talk about how funny the Ynnari plotline has become now. Eldrad's the guy who summoned Inniad into existence. The Deathwatch messed the ritual up and caused Inniad to be only half awake or whatever the hell, but Eldrad was the guy to get this rolling. Yvraine may be his prophet, but Eldrad's the one who started all of this. And in his latest lore, he's given up. After the big battle above, he went back to Ulthwe's Seer Council and asked for forgiveness for the whole affair and being too brash in supporting the Ynnari so much. They granted it, seeing as even in exile, he came back to save his Craftworld, which means that at present, Ulthwe is back at almost full strength because almost everyone involved in the Ynnari plotline in-universe seems to be aware of how bad it sucks. For a few other random bits I've forgotten about, so I'm throwing them in here now, Ulthwe actually has warp portals on it. The biggest two are Grevrian's Gate and Kalmanok. Grevrian's Gate is one of the apparently hundreds that connect the points across the galaxy, although this may just be an older book's way of describing webway gates. If they are true warp portals, however, I could see Ulthwe being the Craftworld to have such things. The Eldar can't interact with the warp for long, but a group of Farseers did invade Nurgle's garden, and warp spiders work by jumping in and out of it for brief moments. If any Craftworld has the psychic knowledge on how to safely traverse the warp, even for brief moments, it'd be Ulthwe. Kalmanok, meanwhile, is the biggest hangar ever. It's a massive, and I mean massive, space dock that technically only actually has the entrance to it on Ulthwe. The rest of it thing might not even be inside the galaxy as we know it, but if you want in and out, you go through Ulthwe. And the symbol of Ulthwe is Isha's eye, both in honor of one of their ancient dead gods and as a reminder that they once ruled the galaxy and have now lost that. A fitting thing to have, given both their sorry state and because Isha's lore is like 50% crying over all the problems she faced. Not unjustly crying, mind you, the poor thing went through a lot. For lore positives of running a Craftworld Ulthwe army, you have the most classically Eldar army of all the Craftworld Eldar. This is the army of alien psychers predicting fate and doing all sorts of random, unknowable stuff in service of that, striking without warning to either friend or foe and leaving seemingly at random as well. The idea most people have of the Eldar is in fact what Ulthwe is most like, completely undiscernible aliens acting almost like a force of nature instead of another sentient being. If you want all in on the Eldar shtick, you go Ulthwe. You also get to be perhaps the most proactive army in the entire setting. Almost everyone else is reacting to other threats. The Imperium is responding to the fires all the other armies cause and putting them out. The other Eldar mostly intervene in response to another faction doing something else to them, or a maiden world. Ulthwe, meanwhile, looks into the future, sees what's going to happen, and then goes out to either prevent it or ensure it. They're taking actions for events so far into the future that not only is no one involved alive yet, the goddamn planet it'll take place on hasn't even been settled yet. From Fulgrim to Inniad and countless events in between, the Seers of Ulthwe have been marching forward with clear purpose to keep the galaxy safe, so if you want someone who actually has a plan and isn't just putting out fires, you want Ulthwe. It isn't strictly speaking unique to them, but a lot of other proactive factions aren't the most approachable of people. The Tyranids and the Orcs are also pretty proactive, but I don't want to give them credit for it, because it's easy to be proactive when all you want to do is eat people or punch people, nor is it proactive in a constructive way. Ulthwe is also one of the Eldar to go with if you want your army to be tied in the lore to others. They work with all the Eldar, they work with Imperials such as that Navigator House, they work with the Tau. Eldrad was chatting to Gilliman for quite some time, and left a Seer to hang out with him during the Indomitus Crusade. Ulthwe can be found all over the place. It even applies to them interacting with everyone as enemies. There's not a single faction that hasn't found a banana peel placed under their shoe at the exact worst time through the machinations of Ulthwe. Be it working with or against them, if you play Ulthwe, you'll have people everywhere that know your name. The Craftworld militarily having an actual military does give room for some interesting developments and ideas on how to run them as well. At least in terms of building an army this way if you'd like, Ulthwe has actual military units. Even Baal Tan, the most militarized Craftworld, is instead throwing expertly trained martial artless warriors trained in one specific way for centuries. Then you go fight Ulthwe and the Black Guardian Sergeant tells his squad to lay down supporting fire while calling in a psychic artillery barrage and magically radioing in for vehicle support. It brings them back down to being mundane in a relatable way, at least in a militaristic sense. The reason they fight may be unknowable, as are their next actions, but you can sort of recognize Ulthwe's tactics. And it's neat to see, even if you don't want to read into it like I just did. For the tabletop positives of running an Ulthwe army, this will of course mostly be broad strokes, given that everything is now detachments instead of sub-faction bonuses. So for building an Ulthwe army, you of course want to start with every Psyker unit you can grab. Particularly Farseers and Warlocks of course, but I'm sure a Spirit Seer hanging around would fit. Warlocks can be good at cutting through chaff, and even reasonably tough units if close enough to each other, what with their Destructor getting up to strength 7 if they're close to other Psykers. Even if not that, anti-infantry 2-up means that if they swing at a guy, chances are they're wounding. Subtracting 2 from anything charging unit they're attached to, meanwhile, means you can more reliably position your Guardians in otherwise dangerous spots. Farseers, meanwhile, can ass blast blobs of infantry with their Eldritch Storm, and a guaranteed either hit, wound, or damage roll for a unit they're leading is nice. Plus, adding 1 to hit rolls of a selected enemy unit for a unit a Farseer is leading as well is also nice. There won't be much else in the way of specific rules, however, because while Psykers are Ulthwe's thing, and therefore knowing exactly how they work is good, 11th edition is right around the corner. Depending on when this video goes up, it might already be here, and the above is therefore entirely invalidated for current play. I'd be willing to bet the above will likely stay the same or be similar, but don't be 100% certain on anything like that, as always. As for how to build the rest of an army, however, that's much easier and simpler. You're first off going to want a lot of Guardians. Ulthwe does have them as a standing army, so for maximum lore friendliness, you should have a lot of them too. Farseers and Warlocks can lead them, so you can never go wrong by taking more of them as well. Just make sure to paint them black. You'll also, however, want to take a good amount of vehicles and support platforms. The Craftworld's army is proficient in using them, so everything from Vulcans to Fire Prisms works fine perfectly here. Stay away from more than a squad or 2 of Aspect Warriors though, since Ulthwe lacks them. And when in doubt, fill in more Warlocks and Guardians. You can never have enough of those, I really can't say it enough. This means that an army dealing with this theoretical Ulthwe army will need to bring a mix of anti-vehicle and anti-infantry units, because otherwise they'll almost certainly end up not having the firepower to deal with your vehicles, or the numbers to force your endless horde of Guardians off the objective. Harlequins aren't a bad option to throw in either, since Ulthwe works with them frequently. Throw a clown at someone. For some reason in 40k, that's the only option the Eldar have that not only works out most of the time, but seems to be universally respected. Legitimately, when have you ever heard anyone say anything bad about the Harlequins, even amongst non-Eldar fans? With Ulthwe, you can leech off a bit of that goodwill and be lore-friendly for it. And of course Eldrad. His house is here. Of course you can freely include Eldrad in an Ulthwe army and keep it friendly with the lore. As for lore downsides of Ulthwe, you have the Eldar army that's the single most vulnerable to getting the super obvious plot twist defeat of Le Farseer caused le problems he sought to le prevent. You'd think after the millionth time that's been done in the history of media, not even just Warhammer in general, people would stop using that twist. But no, and Ulthwe gets to suffer for it. That's on top of normal Eldar suffering too, by the way. Thank you, Watch Captain Artemis. I will never not bitch about him if he's even vaguely relevant. You're also in the thick of things, so a moment to rest is even less likely than it is for the other Eldar. Some of it isn't necessarily self-inflicted, since they act to prevent greater loss down the line, but their constant meddling has given them no small amount of enemies, even if it does also make them some friends. Beyond that, they were stuck next to the Eye of Terror, which was literal hell, and now they've had to deal with the Great Rift more and more. Coupled with any given moment, they may or may not be missing a good chunk of people to the Inarian whatever the hell Eldrad is doing. It's a very hectic life in Craftworld Ulthwe, which is indeed why they have that standing army. They're also, and I'm potentially going to catch some flack on this one, perhaps the most boring in concept of the Eldar. I love the shtick of them being so into the psychic fields they had to form a normal army because they ran out of people to join the aspect paths. But in some ways it also feels like they're the Eldar whose gimmick is being the Eldar. Every other Eldar sub-faction can do what they do just fine. They also have stuff on top of it. It's a bit too specialized for me, which is ironic for the Eldar. All of the rest of them tend to be Psykers and then X, but Ulthwe is Psykers, but like really Psykers. And I don't think they're boring, I do like them. Alaitok exists, and their entire bit is that they have a lot of rangers because an Eldar born on Alaitok wants to be anywhere but Alaitok. But I can understand why someone might not like Ulthwe for that reason. As for tabletop downsides, Guardians are the standard Eldar baseline infantry model with all that entails. Toughness 3 ain't great, though they hit and wound well enough and put out a good amount of firepower, and the little turret you get is good. Storm Guardians are that, but more melee focused. Still not great. Having your lore-based list be an exceptional amount of basic infantry is always a rough thing for anyone but a horde army like the Guard or Tyranids. In older editions, the Black Guardians actually had some unique stats, nothing amazing, but a slight point cost difference and slightly better overall stats than normal Guardians. Nowadays, I don't think that's a thing anymore, which is a shame both fluff-wise and rule-wise. The continuation of this, meanwhile, Meanwhile, that an Ulthwe army isn't terribly specialized in an army whose main strength is specialization. Aspect warriors tend to be quite good at what they do, and by playing a proper Ulthwe list, you're committing hard on not really having any. Eldar vehicles can be absolutely vicious and make up for it, but an opponent correctly building a force with a decent amount of anti-infantry and anti-vehicle means that you might be up shit's creek without a paddle. Psychic powers being what they are now also means that playing Ulthwe for the Psychers is gonna be very disappointing. There's no real bonus for specializing in it, nor is there fun phases and plans to make for them anymore. There's just a weapon with a keyword and an ability that happens essentially automatically. As far as rules go, everything that made this Craftworld special has by and large been taken away with the Psychic phase, and then Black Guardians not having rules. Sucks to suck, Ulthwe. And the last tabletop downside is that they're the least colorful of the Eldar armies. Not exactly a game-breaking problem, but part of why I like the Eldar is that they're a Skittles package coming to life to take yours. And Ulthwe is just black and white with red highlights for their eyes. That's kinda boring, even if, yeah, they wear black because they're always in mourning for their lost kin and all that elf emotional hullabaloo. It makes sense and I get it, but just because they aren't colorful for a reason doesn't mean I like it. Aspect warriors could fix this because they're always painted in their aspect color schemes, but Ulthwe's whole gimmick is they don't have many aspect warriors. The part of the army whose color schemes are specifically designed to be vibrant and have a ton of visual variety, you get none of. Black and white and black and white and black and white, and that is your lot for 95% of this army's color scheme. Kinda boring, Ulthwe, not gonna lie. Not as boring as a lie talk, but you have to try to be that boring. And that was Craftworld Ulthwe, the Guardians of the Eye of Terror. Nowadays, the guardians of some random guy's house for 1,000 years, until it's time to burn it down out of nowhere. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the psychic powers to my Craftworld Ulthwe, allowing me to randomly assault people for reasons that I swear are totally valid and real, guys, trust me on this. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. If I was working on 11th edition, I'd make two major changes. I want to bring back psychic powers and unique rules for sub-armies. Detachments are probably better from a gameplay standpoint, but it's just not the same, it's not as fun. As for psychic phase stuff, I mean, do you need an explanation for that coming back? I like when my spells feel like spells, especially in Warhammer, where if I roll good, I get an amazing boon or damage source, but if I biff it, my guy gets his soul eaten. Except in this case, I'd be running Ulthwe, and the Farseer helmet would let me more or less ignore perils. Yeah, I run Eldar, we ignore half the rules in the game and abuse the other half, what about it? Your army gets all the good books, the Eldar wipe the floor with you on the tabletop. That's the trade-off.